Welcome, everybody, to the 50C Forum on Mental Health. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited to bring this to you today. My name is Jason Millicent. I'm the Director of Communications for the DC Department of Parks and Recreation, and my agency is where the FitDC initiative lives and is executed. FitDC is a health and wellness initiative started by Mayor Bowser in 2015. And now we're here in 2021, and coming into this year, we actually partnered with Aetna to bring a more comprehensive, more body, mind, and community approach to holistic wellness and fitness opportunities and provide resources to DC residents completely for free, but in a format that made sense for the times we're in with the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'm so excited to be talking to you guys about mental health because as we look to be turning the corner a little bit, we are now in a situation where we're going to have just as much transitioning to do with our mental health as we all try to get back to normal. So without further ado, I'd like to kick this panel off, and we have a great panel here for you today. I'm going to toss things over to Marcus Duckworth, who is the Vice President of Client Management and Aetna's Public and Labor Division Leader. So Marcus, take it away for us.
Thank you so much, Jason, and good evening to all of you who've taken the time to join us and engage in this very important discussion. As Jason mentioned, I am part of Aetna's local dedicated public sector and labor team here in DC. And as a health company, we certainly understand the importance of not only openly talking about mental health issues that face our community, but also talking about what all of us can do to address those challenges head on. I'd also like to thank DC government for their continued partnership in all things health and wellness, along with the DC Department of Parks and Recreation, the Fit DC3 team, and Sky Schools as well. With that said, I would now like to introduce Dr. Hemant Sharma, Associate Professor of Pediatrics and Co-Chair of Wellness at Children's National Hospital.
Thank you so much, Marcus, and thank you to each of you for joining us tonight. We have an esteemed panel who will be joining us tonight to discuss this very important topic of mental health. I'd like to introduce our panelists briefly, and then you will be hearing from each of them in much more depth momentarily. But first, we have Dr. Barbara Basran, who is Director of the DC Department of Behavioral Health. We're delighted to have Dr. Basran with us this evening. We have Michael Sweetney, who is a DC native and former NBA center for the New York Knicks and a mental health awareness advocate. Delighted to have Mike with us as well. And last but certainly not least, we have Rajshri Patel, who's an international meditation and wellness instructor and author. So Rajshri, I would like to start off by turning things over to you to begin tonight's session with a leading opening practice to set the stage for this discussion this evening.
Thank you, Hemant, and thank you to the rest of the panel. Welcome, everybody, and let's just begin by sort of recentering and regrouping. So if I could just have you close your eyes for a couple of moments, wherever you are, however you're sitting, just relax back in your chair, close your eyes, and bringing your attention from wherever it is, work or family or friends or politics, letting that go and onto yourself, the place where you're sitting. And to begin with, let's just take a nice long breath in. A little bigger, come on, a little bigger. And through the mouth, letting the day go. One more time. Breathe in, it's life, it's energy, just breathe in. And let the day go, what doesn't serve you. One last breath. Hold it a second and release. It's just so important to recenter, regroup, as we enter each new thing in our day. So here you are, the day is over, and now part of this conference. One more breath in. Little longer, push yourself a little longer, hold, and release. And just notice the difference those 4 breaths can make. Check in with yourself. And let's open the eyes. And back to you, Dr. Sharma.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rajshri. That was wonderful. And I can say for myself, I feel like I'm ready to begin this conversation now in this moment. So to kick things off, I would like to hear from each of our esteemed panelists about their journeys that brought them to this point. And each of you have had a very personal journey in mental health advocacy and in the important work that you're doing. And so starting off first with you, Michael, I'd love for you to share some of that journey that brought you to this point and to the wonderful work that you're doing, in particular to raise mental health awareness for our youth.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you guys for having me. I'm so excited to be here. What is that? Okay. I pretty much came into the mental health world because of my own experience. When I got drafted in 2003 by the Knicks, it was pretty much an amazing experience, journey. I was excited about it, and as I was preparing for the season, 3 days before the season started, I got the call to my father, who was introduced to the game of basketball, my best friend, my everything, passed away of a massive heart attack, and that kind of like shook my world. So I came home from New York to DC, had the funeral, and went back to training camp. No grieving, no time off. So I literally had the funeral. Next day, I'm in training camp. So no time to really, take it all in and understand what was going on. And I realized I'm coming into the NBA, which is a serious business, basketball. So those two things just really didn't mix. And I started being, being depressed. Things wasn't going my way, athletic wise, basketball wise. I didn't get the playing time I thought I shouldn't. And, one thing led to another. Next thing you know, I'm in probably one of the darkest holes mentally. And I was probably what you call a professional masker, where nobody really knew what I was struggling. Because back in 2000, now people talk about it, we're having these conversations, but back then it was kind of frowned upon. It was like a weakness. And so for me, I hid it for years, and became pretty much suicidal at that point. And I struggled for years, and I finally, got the help that I needed. And once I got the help that I needed, I saw that other people were struggling just like me. And maybe not on my level, but I saw other people that was, struggling. For a while, I thought I was different. I thought that something was wrong with me. And then come to find out, there are people that have, depression, anxiety, whatever it may be. And once I kind of shared my story and it went viral, and I had heard so many testimonies of people like, thank you for saying it. Now I'm feeling a certain way. And I kind of felt my purpose. So now I go around speaking, at organizations, schools, wherever it may be. Every day I'm in the field, just telling my story, just sitting and talking to people, spending time, and just trying to change the stigma of mental health, and just trying to, obviously I'm not a doctor, I can't diagnose anybody, but just having my experience of what I've been through, hopefully I can, push someone that is struggling to get the help that they need. And so that's just my goal, and just keep pushing, and I'm excited about it. I love doing what I do.
Wow, that's powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that. As I was listening to you, I think that part of what resonated with me as I heard you is that, as a high profile person, sometimes it's hard to be vulnerable and share those personal struggles that we're dealing with. But now on this end of it, you're able to see just the impact that you've had on so many people by sharing your story and making them feel that they're not alone, and that, it's something that we should all be talking about openly. So we're going to keep the conversation as interactive as possible. And, for those of you at home listening in, we'd love to hear your insights, your reflections, your questions. Feel free to enter those in the chat function. Next, Dr. Basran, I would love to hear, and I'm sure all of our audience at home would love to hear more about the work that you are doing in your department for DC residents.
Yes, good evening, everyone. And I am really delighted to be here. I want everyone to know that May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so this month is really an opportunity for us to talk about mental health and to bring it out of the closet. Mental health really impacts 21% of all of our adults within our community and about 17% of youth. And we have this annual opportunity to have a frank and open discussion about mental health. Mental health, of course, really affects both of our emotional, our psychological, and by the way, our physical well-being. As our previous speaker talked about, it affects how we think, how we feel, and how we act. And it really helps determine how we handle stress, how we relate to others, and how we make healthy choices. Now, during this pandemic, every single one of us in America has been impacted in terms have seen impacts related to our mental health. Now, we've all suffered social isolation, disruption of our routines. Many of us have suffered economic loss, and some of us have really suffered because we have lost loved ones as a result of the pandemic. And therefore, that coupled, particularly for Black Americans, with the gun violence in our communities, the impact of law enforcement and law enforcement's actions within our community has really added to the stress, distress, and trauma that all of us have experienced. So in my role as director of the Department of Behavioral Health, we have really had to look at what we can do to provide services and supports to our community. Now, one of the things that I want to say up front is all of us know that a lot of the restrictions that we've been under for the past year and a half are being relaxed. However, it's really important that we maintain our public health approach over the next days and months. This means self-care is really important. The kind of activity that we went through that helps us to center and reduce stress is extremely important for us. Deep breathing, maintaining a schedule, really minimizing the amount of time we spend on the news are all things that all of us can do. But I want to really share that we are really also seeing that people are experiencing stress related to going back to our old normal and into our new normal. They are fearful of going to school, of going back to work. There's vaccine hesitancy, particularly among people of color, and all of those things are things that we have to deal with. However, the Department of Behavioral Health, I want to just highlight a couple of quick things for you to think about where you can receive some support. One, we have a 24/7 mental health hotline. It's 1-888-793-4357, or easier, 1-888-7-WE-HELP. If you call that number, you will be connected to a licensed clinician who can help you and listen and work with you around dealing with stress, grief, or loss, and can help you through this troubled time. Having somebody to talk to for most of us will be sufficient to help us resolve issues. However, if you need more, our clinicians can then connect you to that care. I want to also share with you that we have also developed some specialized programs for parents with children. We have a parent support program that includes 24/7 access to clinicians and also Wellness Wednesdays. So every Wednesday at 5:30, from 5:30 to 6:30, you can go on our website and you can join a parent support group where you have an opportunity to get tips around how to deal with some of the stressors you're facing, as well as having an opportunity to share with others who are in a similar circumstance. And it's offered in both Spanish as well as in English. And I think that that's really important. We also are working with our school community. Our school-based behavioral health clinicians have been working throughout the pandemic and will be going back in to work as our schools are open. One of the things to note is that we work very closely with DC, with our district public school system around something called Mind Matters. This is an opportunity for our teachers to get together and talk about what their experiences are and to get some support. Every single teacher in classroom will have that along with our kids. And then lastly, I just want to quickly say that people with substance use disorders are also impacted. And so if you do nothing else, please right now text Live Long DC to 888-111. And that will give you the location of where you can get naloxone, a rapid reversal drug that can bring people out of an opioid overdose. And it can also tell you where you can get services and supports. We also have our crisis response teams on the ground every day, all day, 24/7. And they are now involved in launching a new effort where 911 calls will be connected to our Access Helpline, and we will be able to deploy a mental health professional to deal with those people who are suffering a mental health crisis, as opposed to having a police officer go and address those issues, particularly when there are no safety issues. So I know that's been quick. We are here to help. Remember, 1-888-7-WE-HELP. It's free. You don't have to give your name. You don't have to give anything. It's confidential and it's with a clinician, and you can get that support.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Bazaran, for sharing such a wealth of resources for DC residents. Your department is doing truly amazing work. And I'm so happy that you were able to share those resources with everyone listening tonight. Rajshri, moving on to you. You are an international meditation instructor, speaker, author. You've taught sky breath meditation and other art of living programs to tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands across the globe. And we'd love to hear more about your journey on this path towards spiritual health, mental health, and finding that vital force within each of us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Welcome everybody again. So my journey began in Los Angeles, a little bit unlikely in a sense. I want to expand the idea of mental health to maybe mental hygiene, just to look at it from this perspective, in the sense that it's very clear when we're going through a situation, a crisis like what Michael described, grief, loss, obvious pain, then we think perhaps to even reach out for a conversation around mental health, especially now. As Michael said, when he joined the NBA, it wasn't really openly discussed. And then he was brave and courageous and he put it out. So today there is more room, but also separate from the pandemic, separate from the transition. I want to go back to, in a way, my story. I was a lawyer working in LA. I had moved from New York to LA, and I was a little displaced, or a lot displaced, because my family was in New York. Culturally, I felt displaced in a sense all my life. You know, I was born in Uganda, raised in India for the first 7-8 years. Then I landed in New York City from a little rural village into, can you imagine, Manhattan. Everything was overwhelming, but like Michael, I also myself just kept going from one thing to another. School, education, do the right thing, the internal pressure, and of course the external pressure that comes in somehow making it through life. And I got transferred to Los Angeles I arrived in a new city. I didn't know anybody. My first day on the job, what does it mean to be a lawyer? How am I going to make it? There was all this other pressure, along with the displacement, along with trying to fit in, the pressures of achieving and showing up, in a certain sense of not even knowing who I am. You see what I'm saying? That other level of stress. So for me, mental health is a conversation around everything from stress to internal pressures, external pressures, trying to keep up with the Joneses, not knowing where and how we connect with ourselves, and not having the tools. Not only not having a place to speak and share, especially 35 years ago when I moved to LA, just how do I move? And coincidentally, I happened to see a little sign that said Pandit Ravi Shankar. At the time, there was a sitar player, famous sitarist in India. I thought I was going to see a musician. But Ravi Shankar in south of India is a common name like Jones or John Paul or something like that. And when I arrived, I discovered, in fact, a spiritual master. That was my first step into spirituality, or I should say, even acknowledging, as Barbara said, in a certain way, our internal world.
Mhm.
The mind and the influence it has, not only emotionally, not just mentally, but also physically. Everything from our sleep to our connections, how we relate to people, how we show up, how effective we are, our health, heart disease, everything is tied to it. And I had really had all my attention, all my life outside. And so when I arrived at this event, the breathing course, I'll say that, the sky breath, as you mentioned earlier, it was eye-opening, it was transformative, but it was the key that I needed to realize I'm not just what people see outside, the facade, the makeup, the image that we project to get through it. Like, in a sense, what Michael said, he showed up, he had to go back, he didn't have a chance to grieve, everything was bottled. He showed up to play the game because life demanded it, and everything else was getting pushed into the corner. And I discovered very clear, very concrete tools, tips, wisdom, education, awareness that said, oh, if I can take care of my inside, my mental hygiene, I bathe every day, I brush my teeth twice a day, I comb my hair, I groom my clothes and iron them. So what if I also took care of my mind once a day? That is what God offered to me. Tools through the breath, which sounded so woo-woo to me at the time. Imagine this is back in 1989 where yoga was new, meditation was not so heard of, and then saying to people, oh, yes, breathing. I've been breathing since I was born. Now what are you talking about? I don't need to breathe. So it opened the door and it gave me tools that have a profound, profound impact on our ability to sort of bathe our mind, our emotion, get rid of the negativity, the stress, the tension, the pressure that we hold on to, including, I must say, shortening the grieving process. What I mean by that is it allows us to connect to what we feel rather than tucking it away. And so that we go through, you know, the only way out is through, in a sense. And so that's what it did for me. 6 months later, I left law. I was a prosecutor, no less, working at the US Attorney's Office. And then I transferred to the LADA's office and I said, okay, enough with criminal law. Now time for natural law, breathing and inner life and humanity and connection. And 6 months later, I basically joined the Art of Living Foundation. I, supported the inner city work, the prison smart programs, the Sky for Schools, and a bit of, I think, what Barbara might have mentioned, the Mind Matters programs and so on. I traveled all over the world supporting in some way or another what we could call, broadly speaking, mental health, whether that's extreme from depression to stress, to internal pressure. And there's just been so much research, so much scientific research done that shows the impact of breath and the impact of meditation and the impact of going inward. And so, like Michael, I discovered my purpose by chance, I suppose, or by some bigger plan than I can imagine. And that started my journey into connecting and serving and supporting humanity as I grow to see what I can do to uplift them. So I'm very happy to be here. Michael, thank you for sharing so openly and so honestly your experience and what brought you here.
Wow. Wow. I am reflecting so much, and I don't even know where to start, but there were so many themes that each of the three of you have brought up that resonate so strongly. This idea of displacement and, not even knowing who we are is at the heart of so much of what each of us struggle with. As I listened, I was remembering back to medical school for me, because that was a time where I think in some ways did I not even know who I was, but I also struggled with, am I even good enough to be here? And there were times that I thought, my goodness, this is, these people are so much smarter than I am. How could I possibly get through this training? And tragically, in my second year of medical school, one of my classmates who was in my small group of four of us, in the first year who learned gross anatomy, she committed suicide. And she was one of these people that was quietly struggling, and it really was a moment for each of us to really look inward and recognize that all of these moments where we put that mask and we just try to keep going and go to the next thing and take the next exam, get to the next level. If we don't do what you were just mentioning, Rajshri, which is really connect to the emotions that we're experiencing, it gets covered over. And that in and of itself is traumatic. And so I just relate to so much of what has been discussed so far. Putting it into the context of this past year and several months, this has been a time of tremendous trauma on multiple levels. And there obviously has been the pandemic, but I also reflect and recognize that there have been multiple pandemics. There have been struggles that we have faced as a society with structural inequality and racism and issues of social justice. And it has been a time of great trauma for many in our communities. And I'm curious for each of you, what personal observations have you had about this heightened need over the past several months? And what can be done for the particular needs that have arisen in the context of the past several months? And I'd like to start first with you, Dr. Basran. Thinking about the struggles of the past several months, what are the particular mental health issues that we need to pay attention to and ensure that we're addressing?
Well, first of all, I would really like to start by saying that as we really think about the whole issue of health equity, we have to really understand that to achieve health equity, we have to remove the unjust causes of poor health. And that includes, how we deliver care. It also looks at the social determinants of health, which we are now beginning to talk about. And this really involves the impact on our access to wealth, housing, food, education, and healthcare. And in order to do that, from my perspective, one of the things that we have to move towards is a system where we are dealing and providing services that deal with mental health equity. I think that COVID-19 has really highlighted the impact of racism all of the inequities that I've talked about, the social justice issues that we've talked about. And in order for us to really move forward in terms of an equitable process, it doesn't mean that we adopt a colorblind process where everybody gets the same thing. But it means, in fact, that we have to provide services within the cultural construct of the person that we're talking about. And so it means that cultural and linguistic competence is really important in terms of opening up access to even care.
Yes.
Because we all have within our culture, our cultural views of health and wellness, of mental illness and mental health and mental well-being, and we have to work within that framework in order to address it. I was just shocked by the data that we were looking at during the pandemic, where if you looked at that data, even within the District of Columbia, we had 1,122 people lives lost within the district. 853 or 76% of them were Black lives lost. And another 125 were Latino lives lost, with 10% non-white Hispanics and 2% being kind of in the other category and 1% being in the Asian category. And I think that this is a direct result of the culmination of all of these factors that have impacted health equity and mental health equity within our society. I really think that we have to begin to move forward in a new way to address these issues from a cultural and linguistically competent perspective. I truly believe that culturally responsive care not only addresses health equity, but it is quality care. And so we have to stop talking about it and giving lip service to moving the structural barriers, addressing the microaggressions that we all experience when we are in a different skin within this society, so that we can really move to a point of mental wellness.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for bringing attention to those important issues in terms of social determinants of health and all of the determinants of health inequities that we've been facing, not only in terms of physical health. I think that is something that certainly has borne out just looking at the pandemic itself, but the toll in terms of mental health also is disparate. So it's important for us to look at that. Rajshri, thinking of this issue, I mean, one of the things as I was listening to you, you talked about this distinction between the outer events that are happening around us and then the inner world that we're each dealing with. How, thinking of this past year, which from the context of the outer environment has been so tumultuous and so traumatic, how do we process that and preserve our mental hygiene and health, as you mentioned?
So I think a couple of things. What Dr. Bazran mentioned, we do need to bring equity on all the levels, right? We cannot address one part of our life and ignore another part. And so she very clearly and efficiently, in a sense, put all the ideas where there are inequities and what we really have to do as leaders, as a government, as individuals, as influencers. We must address the outer world 100%. But I think that alone isn't sufficient, which is what we go back to, when we initially spoke. We also have to address our internal, inner emotional, mental resilience to all those changes, because the equity isn't going to happen overnight. We've been struggling to bring it about for a long, long time. And because maybe of these unfortunate events that have been going on for the last 15 months or so, I would say the quote, good thing that came out of it is now we've really pushed the inequities up on the surface so we can really start to talk about it. What are we going to have to do? Nobody can really hide, though, of course, there will always be that. We can't hide. We have to talk about it. But simultaneously, we need to engage what was used earlier, self-care. Internal resilience must be there. And what we have to do, if I again, go back to my example, as a minority, as a person who, quote, was displaced, who showed up in New York, at the time, I must tell you, people didn't even know an Indian from India. I was in 6th grade and I would say, I'm Indian. And they would go, ooh, you live in a teepee? Oh my God, did you slay a buffalo? People were not aware. They just immediately equated it to the American Red Indian, another, group of people who've been completely, quote, displaced, right? So this sense of not fitting in, I was losing my own power, my own sense of being internally empowered for my own voice. Do you see what I'm saying? And we must address these inequities, particularly in the realm of emotional, mental health, and hygiene, both. We have to empower the individual to have a voice to know this isn't okay, and to come at the change with a grounded, stable, powerful state of mind, not just in frustration, because that's when we lose. We lose from both ends. It's about coming back to it and saying, we don't allow this, letting the voice speak to invite others to join. And so I think my journey has been about empowering the individual from the inside to speak up and make a change, what we call service warriors or Seva warriors, to go out and ask for the external equities to change also. So that's the way I see it. It must be a two-pronged approach.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think I can relate so much to what you're saying, because oftentimes one may misinterpret this to think, well, all I have to do is self-care. But no, you also have to care for the world around you. And so that seva, that service, but the changes that we're trying to implement, they do take time. And it is a struggle. And so in the midst of doing that work, that investment in self-care is so important as well. I think that's what I gleaned from what you were saying, Rajshri.
I 100% hear you. The only thing I would say is when we empower ourselves, the self-care that comes from this place of not me, myself, and I, but a sense that I'm part of the whole,
Yes.
You can't see the tree without the earth. And actually without the heavens. The tree is an arm coming out of the earth looking to the heavens. It's connected. There's an enormous interdependence. And if we could educate, raise human consciousness to see that we are one humanity, one human family occupying a globe together, then you naturally serve, because you don't see them as other, you see them as family. That's really what I'm saying.
Yes. That's exactly it. That separate, we often have that separateness, right? The ego likes to separate one from the other, but recognizing that oneness within us is really the key here. And even as going back to the inequities, there wouldn't be inequities if we recognize we are all one, if we look upon each other as our own self. Michael, as I was listening to you, it struck me that you have stepped into purpose in this work that you're doing now. And I wonder how you have experienced your purpose refining and magnifying over the past year with all that we have been through in our communities. How have you experienced that, and how has it influenced the work that you are doing?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for me, every day I visit, substance abuse centers and homeless shelters, and we, so it's amazing. So one of the things that that struck me is, so I went in there, and most of the people I talked, we sit and we have conversations, and they tell me, the main thing that comes up is, when the pandemic happened, the world stopped. I was at home, and I figure out I'm not who I think I am. I'm not who I want to be. And so many people are like, wow, I've been, pretty much like the lady said, we've been on a go so much, and I'm just trying to push us to the side. I'm just, people working 12, 13 hours a day on a go, not really, just coming home, eating dinner, going to sleep, not really realizing who am I. And the main thing, and it's people that pretty much before the pandemic has had regular jobs, and now they're in a substance abuse center because they've like been sitting at home, and it's just like flesh, it festered in, and it gathered so much stress and so much. Next thing you know, they started using, alcohol or drugs, whatever it may be. And they got to this dark, dark place, and they're just trying to figure it all out. And it was just like, it really struck me when I seen them, like, wow, like, how many people were like this, not even just what I'm seeing in my face. This is what I'm seeing here in New York. I mean, people were just so much, gathered in their work, and really had to come home and like, wow, okay, not being funny, like, wow, I don't know who I am. Wow, I don't really, like the spouse that I had, because we're in the house every day together. So it's just so much that people, just starting to realize what's going on in their life. And it's just like, it really struck me. And like, for me, I think in my household, it kind of turned into a positive. It became my family, we became closer, but I definitely have seen other families grow apart because like, nobody didn't really know who they were. And I think for me and my wife, definitely, we both kind of have our purpose. We're in a good, mind state. Just imagine, two spouses don't really know who they are, and then they just locked in the house together. That's just, a recipe for some things that happen. So that's one of the main conversations that I have daily with people, is just trying to, like, this pandemic has made them realize they're not who they want to be, and they're trying to figure it out. They don't know how to take care of themselves. They don't know how to, and also too with the, so much division, not getting political, but there's so much division going on, and the left, the right, and what religion is this and that. And like so many people just all over the place and don't know, it's so much hatred on top of that. It's just a, it's just been, magnified a lot during this pandemic.
Yeah. As I listen to you, I think many people in the audience can relate that there probably have been folks that they were just kind of going through their life, and going on to the next thing, going to work, coming home, doing everything that was required. And then this was a hard stop. This forced folks to really deal with whatever they may have kind of pushed slowly below the surface. And then it kind of created that opportunity for it to come up. As I listened to you, one thing that struck me is that you flipped it a little bit, and you said, well, there's also been some positives that have come out of this. And I certainly have observed that as well. At the hospital at Children's National, where I work, I co-lead the wellness initiative, and we have been offering programs to the healthcare professionals to help them deal with burnout, to help them deal with mental health struggles, so that they themselves can be whole to then take care of the children in our community. And after the pandemic, the demand for these opportunities just skyrocketed, and we were blown away. We offered the Sky Breath Meditation workshops online that Rajshri was mentioning, and within a span of just a few weeks, over 250 of our healthcare professionals took these courses and incorporated the breathing techniques into their lives. And so it's just been inspiring to see that something so challenging can also encourage us as a society to put that attention on self-care, and incorporating, daily practices as part of our mental health hygiene. Rajshri, you have been teaching the breath, the science of the breath, the impact that the breath can have on our mental well-being for years. What do you think is most important for those who are listening, who may not necessarily have thought about that connection yet between the breath, mental health, and physical health? What's most important for those listening to understand about the power of the breath for our holistic well-being?
Thank you for that question. Before I get there, just one point that I believe Michael and you mentioned, but it's really worth stating, which is that mental health isn't suddenly sometimes. There are those issues, as Michael mentioned, loss of a loved one, not having an opportunity to grieve, tucking it under, and then it starts to leak out in our lives some way or another. But what I think happened with the pandemic for a lot of people is what they had been putting away. whether it was an extreme sort of stress or loss, or little things that happen by the day, by distracting, by avoiding, by, as Michael's saying, not pausing to say, okay, well, really, where am I going? Because we're all on this wheel like a gerbil, just running. And what this did is forced us to pause. And not many of us have ever really been trained to pause and to look in. Most of our life and our education is to keep looking out and keep running to the next thing and the next thing. So, this crisis was a pause, like it or not. And in a sense, going to your question, the breathing has the capacity, without getting into the science and a long conversation, it has the capacity to bring our chattering, running, noisy mind to a pause. It has the ability to take our negative emotions and to release them through the breath, because it's connected. It's quite a science. Our breath is tied to our emotions, right? It's tied to when we feel angry, it's a certain way. When we're sad, it's another certain way. And when we're relaxed, it's a third certain way. It is the thing that gives us the most amount of energy and the most amount of ability to release, in a sense, to pause, to take a break so that we can be okay with what is right now, regroup, and then take action. So it's a tool. It's something we're born with, right? The first thing we do, we breathe in. The last thing we'll do is breathe out. But we haven't realized that it's a God-given gift that can manage our mind and our emotions. And it's the one thing no one teaches us. I do see that Dr. Bazran has
Yes.
hand up, so please jump in.
Dr. Basran, please jump in. Oh, I think you are muted, Dr. Basran.
Thank you. One of the things that you raised that I wanted to comment on is the mental well-being of our direct care providers. We have clinicians that have been in the field the whole time. We have nurses, doctors, and others who've been in our hospitals for the whole time. They have experienced death on a daily basis. They have worked around the clock. And what I am hearing from our first responders is that they are worn out, they are tired, and we are now, as we are moving out of the crisis, we need to be mindful and make sure that we provide the supports to help them achieve mental wellness. So we here at the department, we have the Wentz Center for Trauma, Grief, and Loss is providing free of charge services and supports to our first responder communities at hospitals, mental health clinicians, and so forth, as well as Howard University, which was really doing, I think, an outstanding job of really looking at that cultural perspective to helping our first responders. We can't forget about them as we are moving into the new normal, because people are burned out. And it's something that we must address now.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as I think we all would agree, there is a wealth of data to show that if our healthcare providers, our healthcare professionals, first line providers are burnt out, then the quality of care that they provide, the safety of care that they provide certainly suffers. Raj.
So if I could just say, so here again, call that number, call our mental health hotline, 1-888-7-WE-HELP, because it's for the professionals in the field, those who are out there every day in the community, as well as our other citizens.
Yes, thank you for reiterating that. Just to add a brief comment, we at Children's, we decided to study the impact of these self-care opportunities that we were providing to our healthcare professionals. And it was found in our research that very rapidly, within the span of 3 days, there were significant declines in levels of anxiety and burnout, as well as significant increases in the quality of sleep, improvements in the quality of sleep, improvements in professional vigor, which is one of the key domains of burnout among healthcare providers. And this is such a critical period of time because our first line workers have been going and going and going, and now are being challenged to get back to normal and take care of high volumes of patients coming in. And we need to ensure their well-being, certainly now as well. Rajshri, it looks like you wanted to add something as well.
Yes, I just wanted to follow up with resources as Dr. Bazaran has. So those of you who are listening, particularly in the DC area, and you want to know more about breath and how it can help you to internally get more resilient, more empowered, more regroup, more centered, stress-free if you want, go to fitdc3.com. Every Tuesday at 7:30, there is a program that's available. And there are also healing breath workshops that are conducted for healthcare professionals. As we are all saying, frontline, they are burnt out. They were burned out probably even before COVID because their job demands that. But now it's at another level. So there are lots of resources. Again, I would suggest those of you who are listening, please reach out, as Dr. Bazaran has said, but also every Tuesday at 7:30, you can go to, I'll just repeat, fitdc3.com. Yeah.
Thank you, Rajshri, for sharing that resource. I wanted to make sure that we did spend some time talking about a population that obviously, as a pediatrician, is near and dear to my heart, and that's our children and teens. And we certainly have observed over the pandemic that mental health struggles have been exacerbated among that group in particular, with social isolation of not being able to attend school, not being able to have peer interactions. And Michael, you are an incredible advocate for youth and for teens in this area of mental health. And I wonder if you can just share a bit of your observations of what we've been seeing among our youth and what we as a society and as a community can do to address that.
Yeah, I think pretty much what I've been seeing also, I spend a lot of time with youth also. I think one of the main things I've been seeing is just, a lot of the youth are still trying to find their way and trying to fit in. And some of them are looking in the wrong direction on what to, be in their life. And like a lot of them are, looking at social media and they think that, okay, this person is doing awesome, but what's going on with me? This person is getting a scholarship, especially athletes. I look at a lot of high school athletes where their peers are getting scholarships and they're not fitting in. And next thing you know, they have anxiety and depression. And, kids are just trying to find the wrong ways to fit in. I look at sometimes like the teen girls I've had conversations with, they feel like they have to do, certain sexual things or look a certain way for them to be, even fit in or be accepted. So a lot of the youth are just trying to find a way to be accepted. And a lot of times they go the wrong route on trying to get accepted. And I feel like it becomes a snowball effect and it gets worse and worse and worse. So I think one of the main things we got to do is just pretty much show them the way. I think for me, growing up, and it's not getting old, not trying to sound like an old man, but I think growing up, I had a lot of good older people around me that kind of just showed me the ropes and showed me like, this is how you be accepted. Like for me, just strictly, hey, work hard, keep your mind in the books, work hard at your craft, as being an athlete. And, if people don't accept you for, you working hard and doing the things you're doing, then they shouldn't be in your life. People that's supposed to be in your life, they'll come around. So I was just taught kind of like the old school way. And I think we just need a lot of, big brother peers to these young kids to kind of show them like, this is the way to do it. Because what you see on TV and the internet is not real life a lot of times. And a lot of kids think that is real life. Trust me, the conversations I hear and the stuff they tell them, I'm like, that's not real life. That's not how it is. And they think that. So I think we just got to really have a lot of influences inside these schools and boys and girls clubs and churches, whatever it may be. They just need a lot of, just mentorship on just showing these kids the right way. Is putting the right people in the system to do that. And I think that can be a start to make that change. But that's one of the main things I see is just, kids having the wrong things to look up to. And it's not the right thing to look up to, but sometimes they end up on the street, selling drugs, doing drugs. And, we know that path is, a not great ending most of the time. So just trying to give them the right things and right tools to succeed. And it's not only about being, it's starting to change. I see like now people are talking, showing kids, hey, it's not about, being an athlete or rapper, entertainer to make it out. You can be a doctor, a lawyer, or start your own business. I know financial literacy is starting to be taught now to these young kids. So me growing up, I didn't have that. So there are positives, in it. So I think we just keep going on the road of putting good mentorship around these youth and showing them the right way to do it. A lot of us have made mistakes. So we can say, hey, look, I made this mistake. I don't want you to make the mistake. So this is the road you should go. And I think a lot of times, youth, they do respect people that's struggled and had to figure it out. So,
yeah, I think that mentorship, as you mentioned, is such a critical component of guiding the youth through, a very difficult time in their lives. And certainly that mentorship becomes challenging in the context of the pandemic, and that isolation that so many young people have been experiencing can make these challenges even greater. Dr. Bazran, with what we've been going through for our young people over the past several months, are there any particular pieces of advice or guidance that you would provide to parents or family members who may be listening, who have seen how this past year has impacted the mental well-being of a young person in their life?
Well, I think that, as Michael said, first of all, a lot of our young people need us to listen and hear them and entertain discussions and give them the facts about what's happening. And I think that that's really important. Also, to seek the support they need for guidance. We do have our school-based behavioral health clinicians that are in schools that are working directly with young people virtually through telehealth applications. And I think that that is a great resource. But we need to really talk to our young people and answer their questions with factual information. If you don't know the answer, tell them you'll get back to them, get the correct information, and then give it to them. People are concerned, a lot of young people are concerned about their well-being. They haven't been vaccinated. Now, some of them are beginning from 12 up to be able to be vaccinated. So what does that mean? What does it mean about going back to school? We need to prepare young people for things like their classrooms will look different because fewer of them will be there. They will have to social distance. They will have to use the public hygiene measures that have been established. They will have to wear masks. Their interactions will be very different, but there will be people there to help them through it. And I think that we need to have those honest discussions so that we can prepare our young people and help them in terms of their mental well-being. And then use some of the same things like Ms. Patel was saying, breathing exercises, being able to help be centered, having a regular and routine schedule so that you begin to make the environment predictable. I think that makes young people have some feeling of control. For the younger kids, we also are seeing that many of them are fearful of leaving the cocoon of their home and going back into school. And so some of the things that have been suggested by the CDC and some others, or maybe you can give the young person something that they can carry with them from home to school that really maintains that connection. And you can tell them about what you're going to be doing while they're at school, and you can ask them about what the positive things are that they think they're going to experience. I think all of these particular kinds of discussions are important in helping our young people.
Yes, I completely agree. And, you mentioned the breadth for young people, giving them the opportunity to learn practices when they're young.
Yeah.
And Rajshri had mentioned earlier a program called Sky Schools, which is, I know, in a number of our schools throughout the DC region. Rajshri, is there anything that you would offer to parents who may be listening about Sky Schools, or what these self-care practices can do to help children who may be struggling through the pandemic?
I think there's been a lot of very valid points made between Michael and Dr. Bazran. Conversation, communication is key. But that can only happen if the parent is calm and present and available to connect and communicate. If they're stressed out, it's just like if our healthcare provider, caretaker is stressed out, as a patient walking in, I'm just going to pick that up. So we need the parent, not just the educator, as much as the child, right? The young person, to come together. So this, I think, is a very important piece. And you did mention Sky Schools. They're a program across the country. And right now, things are online. It doesn't matter where you live or what school you go to. I know those programs are available. We'll need to go look into it. And it doesn't matter if you're young or old, teenager or not. What we need is a sense that I belong, that there's someone who has my back, a feeling that I'm heard, a feeling that someone understood, not right or wrong, just a place to connect, that I'm understood, that there's someone listening. And I think that as parents, sometimes just that, what we could call love and light in a very simple way, goes a long way. And often what we do, because of our own stress, because of our own internal pressure, we start pushing it by trying to, quote, guide, educate with shoulds and shouldn'ts. And Michael's just saying, as Dr. Bazran is saying, just talk to them, share information, give them facts, and let them feel that they're in charge and somehow part of the decision making. Because we have to remember, these kids are growing up under the influence of voting for everything. Even if it's slightly artificial, there is a sense that I get to raise my thumb up or thumb down. I get to go complain on Yelp if I don't like it. They enter the world with an enormous sense of, quote, independence, even if they're not ready. Yes, they're developmentally not necessarily ready to digest and comprehend the choices they're making. And like Michael said, they see things on social media. People don't necessarily put up pictures of themselves depressed. It's always something mouth open with a glass in their hand or some happy moment. And inside, what's happening is very different. The social media isn't really telling you what's going on inside. They're influenced by it. They vote. They have some say in it. And so as educators, as parents, as adults, as mentors, we need to talk to them at that level by sharing, where we can say, what do you think? Asking them to engage versus telling them. So I think this is a very big deal, very important piece.
Yeah, there was a comment that was posted by Michelle Hall in the chat. This essence of listening. It's very important to listen to our youth. At the high school, we would have a poetry contest each year. Each year, at least one student would write about a friend that had committed suicide. One of the poems was entitled "When No One Would Listen." Listening is very important. So that's just such a poignant way of expressing the importance of listening to our youth. One of the chats I've been trying to monitor and keep an eye on the questions that those of you at home have been posting. And one of the questions was about your book, Rajshri. And I happen to have my copy of your book here, which one of these days when I see you in person, I'll ask you to sign for me. But it's a beautiful book. And I think for anyone looking to learn more about your journey and about how this path has really impacted you, and you listed this power of vital force. That's the title of your book. Definitely feel free for those listening to look into that. Anything that you would mention, Rajshri, just in your journey of writing that book, what do you think gives us that vital force? We're coming to a point where the world, many are trying to get back to a normal and trying to tap back into that vitality, that sense of vigor that they had and enthusiasm for life. What is the secret? What is the secret to doing that?
Well, I'm sure there's not any one thing that's a secret. I think we've been mentioning throughout this conversation lots of different secrets. And one of the things that the book does, it's not really so much my journey as much as provide tools and tips and wisdom to actually increase or boost our energy, our vitality, our resilience, our agility, what we're calling vital force very broadly. The more internally resilient or vital we feel, the more room we have to deal with the challenges that come at us unexpectedly or planned or otherwise, right? Really, life happens to us continuously. And I think something that maybe it sounds really way out there, but just having this sense that somehow there's something greater than myself at play here also goes a long way, not feeling like an isolated me over here in this big bad world out there, but sense that, okay, I'm here and there's a purpose for me and there is a power greater than me that is with me, and the support I need, I will ask for and get. Because our mind is very powerful. If we focus in on what is not working, then we keep inviting that into our life. And so I'm just suggesting, good sleep. That's very important. It's an obvious thing, but we sacrifice sleep all the time too easily. So good sleep, some little bit of mobility, some decency in terms of food, and then connection. That's very, very essential.
Thank you, Rajshri. Dr. Basran, I know you wanted to jump in as well. And there was a question earlier that one of the members of the audience had posed that I thought you may be able to help address. And the question was, what is in place to help DC seniors with COVID-related depression? But I know there was something that you wanted to share also in response to what Rajshri was just saying. But that the resources that are available for our seniors is something we also wanted to be sure to discuss.
Well, first of all, I'll get back. I just wanted to make sure that we recognize the fact that there are traditional healing practices that can help us when we are really experiencing stress, grief, and distress. It includes everything from the Black church, our ministers, and our faith healers are very important pieces of that. And also looking at other traditional practices within our cultural communities. And so I don't want us to think that we only stay in the Eurocentric box in terms of healing practices, but we expand that as we look at culturally responsive care and how we can really begin to engage people in care and in mental wellness, because none of this is important and nothing will work if you can't get people connected and engaged. I mean, I think that that's important. So we need to be sure that we think about that. In terms of our seniors, the Department of Behavioral Health provides services for the full spectrum of life. And so regardless of your age, regardless of what you're experiencing, we can provide services and supports for you. If you call that Access Helpline number, we can connect you to an appropriate resource, and that's the 1-888-7-WE-HELP. But we do provide those services for individuals who are seniors. And so I think that that's extremely important for people to remember.
Thank you, Dr. Bassaran. There was another question, and you alluded to this in your prior comments, specifically about the church and the roles that our faith communities can play, both in supporting, but also the question was more about stigma of mental health, and how that sometimes in some faith communities may not be something that is openly discussed or addressed. And I'm curious for each of you if there are comments that you would offer about how our churches, mosques, synagogues, temples can play a key role in addressing the mental health of our communities.
Well, I can tell you that within the Department of Behavioral Health, we actively engage the faith community in our service delivery process, because we think that they are extremely important in doing a couple of things. Not only engagement and providing the support that they need, but also providing good information to people who come to whatever the faith place happens to be. And so I think that they have a really significant role in providing support around mental wellness. I mean, I visit churches, talk to people who are parishioners of various churches, and I think that that is some of what all of us, really use our faith as a tool to help us get through those hard things that we have to do in life. And so I just feel that it's critically important. And I think it's been a great partnership with the faith-based organizations that we have engaged.
Michael, there's a question that's come in from Pamela Hodge, and I will try to read this. She said, Mr. Michael Sweeney, we have been watching you play basketball since you were at Oxon Hill High School to Georgetown University to the NBA level. This basketball arena is very overwhelming and challenging, a lot of pressure. Your opening statement was informative, powerful, thought-provoking. Your testimony will inspire the basketball community, hearts and minds. You are absolutely amazing to confront your problems and share your story. I know the pressure. My son played for Gonzaga, wishing you the best in your endeavors. So I just wanted to share that message with you. I think as an athlete, there's immense pressure. And some of this starts very early on in childhood and just continues at each level. For any athletes or parents or families of athletes, are there particular pieces of advice that you would offer, Mike, to them in terms of how to support not only their child's physical fitness pursuits, but also their mental health?
Thank you. First of all, Pamela, thank you so much. That meant a lot to me. I think one of the main things, and I've talked to a few parents about this, I think we, just as much as you work on your jump shot, trying to be in the best shape possible, you got to put that same energy in taking care of your mental. One thing I learned as an athlete, I was at one point I was in the best shape of my life, but my mental wasn't right and it didn't follow. So, the mental definitely takes care of everything. And so definitely got to put the same energy you take care of, like I said, the same energy you take care of with your physical, you got to, do the same with the mental. And also too, always tell parents, just make sure that your kid is having fun. That's the main thing. Just as long as they're having fun, because I've been around kids where they're out there miserable and the parent is forcing them, or they just got so much pressure for the kid being the next thing to take care of them and all that stuff. I say, the main thing is making sure the kid has fun, because once they get to the professional level, that's when it becomes a business, it becomes real. And that's when you kind of just got to, throughout the years, they're having fun. You're training them the right way and telling them, hey, just go out there and have fun, let it be. I think it goes a long way, because like I said, when it becomes professional, it becomes a business. And, you got, 20,000 people, screaming at you and they don't care if you got a loved one at home sick, or if you got an argument with your wife, or whatever it may be, all they want you to do is perform. They can care less about your personal life. I'm just being blunt, honest. And that's a hard thing mentally to prepare for, because during those 2 hours, all they want is you to entertain. And so it's a hard thing to prepare for mentally. So that's why I just tell kids, at a young age, just have fun, because it does change. And so you don't want to go through your whole life being miserable. If you're lucky enough to make it to that level, it just carries over. Next thing you know, you got trauma from, from a childhood to then, and just never solved. So it's one of those things, making sure they have fun, enjoy the moment, and that's it.
Yeah. I think, that's just amazing advice, making sure that you're having fun. I think that goes for sports, that goes for life in general. No matter what we're doing, just trying at every moment to tap into that fun, that fun factor. There was another question that came in that relates to some of what both Rajshri and Dr. Basran were mentioning about alternative and holistic approaches to mental health and well-being. And the question from Manjula: how can we how can we encourage insurance companies to recognize practices, alternative practices like sky breathing and others for mental health and well-being? I don't know if either of you have thoughts about what insurance companies what we could convey to them that might help to convey the importance of this. I know, just looking at the research myself as a healthcare researcher, there are strong data points to suggest that some of these alternative practices can be just, if not more effective than medication for mental health, whether it's depression, anxiety, PTSD. And so I think certainly, those research findings over time will hopefully continue to build and make a strong case for health insurance companies to provide coverage for this. But Rajshri, anything that you would add?
I think that, it's an idea, but you as a medical professional and others in your situation, as you get exposed to alternative, whether it's meditation or breathing or whatever, practicing gratitude and so on, as you see a shift in your own lives, meaning as we have the healing breath and we see the frontliners going through it, they get, on the one hand, this continuing education credit, but then they're starting to see how it's changing their burnout, their personal life. I think that voice goes a long way, but that same thing holds true for us as consumers. We have to, it's part of the conversation we're having, which is we really must have a voice for the change we want to see happen. It's not enough to wait for it to happen. It's not enough that someone else can do it, to really say, yes, ask for it, get people to get behind you and send notices saying, look, this is what's going on. And we really think here are the advantages. And of course, they're going to look at the bottom line. But people like yourselves in the medical profession have a huge say in shifting things around with the insurance companies,
Yeah, thank you for that. And it has been really remarkable just to see the shift that I, as a healthcare professional, have experienced. And then with many of these practices, you then have such a transformation yourself that you just can't wait to share it with everyone else. And I talk about it with patients, I talk about it with colleagues. Every morning at 5:50, there's a group of doctors and nurses from Children's and from all over the country that join breathing together. So I think that enthusiasm for sharing what has helped each of us in our lives is really so powerful. I wanted to just ask a question that also came in that I think is a nice pivot towards the future. And we touched on some of this, but what are some of the positive shifts that we have each seen over the past year, building blocks for a brighter future that we can keep as valuable learnings from this pandemic as we look to the days and weeks ahead? Dr. Basran, I'll start first with you.
I can tell you, just in terms of our practice, we have really learned a lot. First of all, I don't think that we can underestimate the fact that the pandemic has allowed us to have honest discussions about mental health and the need for mental wellness, and have essentially kind of brought that out of the background to the foreground. And I think that that's important because it's okay to get care. And I think that that message has really resonated throughout the time. The other thing in terms of practice, I think some things that we have learned, like the use of telehealth and how telehealth makes it not only more convenient for people to get care, but in many instances, people prefer telehealth, and particularly as a first step. And so we're able to then engage more people in care than we have already. And then here again, I think that through the pandemic, the lesson that we have learned is that we have to really address the social determinants of health if we're going to make a difference in terms of our community's ability to live, work, and play successfully. And those are three big takeaways for me.
Wonderful, wonderful. Michael, what would be the lessons learned that you would want to share with those listening tonight?
I think one of the biggest thing, like I said, I learned during this time is like pretty much everybody's been saying it the whole time. I think it's pretty much taking the time to really take care of yourself, your mental. Like I said, a lot of times where it's just so everybody just I'm guilty of it sometimes. There's so much on the go and so much on on a rush and working and moving and doing this, and you're not really taking care of your mental. And it's crazy because there was a time where I was I told you I'm in shelters every day and this and I realized I got to a point I was so overwhelmed, I was so overworked. And I'm like, wow, I'm making sure everybody else's mental is okay. And I'm out there preaching this. And next thing you know, by the time I get home to my family, I'm just so worn out from the stories I heard during the day. And it took me a while to figure out how to turn that switch off. And I was just so mentally drained. I didn't know how to really handle it. So I think one of the biggest things that take away is just like mainly just taking care of your mental. And I think that's first and foremost. I just realized I got a wife and 3 kids. So, when I come home and I'm worn out, it was affecting them. So like especially so it's one of those things like when you're not taking care of yourself, it does affect other people around you, and it's just and people are looking up to you. So when they see that energy, it definitely does rub off. So I think one of the biggest things is just making sure that your mental and your physical is really taken care of, and like I said, one thing at a time. Like Dr. Raj says, even just some days you just go and just you have your breathing treatment and just meditate, whatever it may be. It don't have to be hours a day; it can be a couple minutes, just something that you're just doing for you to take care of your mental. And I was guilty of that, during the pandemic, and now I learned that, and now I'm starting to see that that's one of the biggest things I'm taking away with. So.
Thank you so much. I just want to read you a comment that Elon posted in the chat, and he said, when people like Mr. Sweetney share how they've been served from wellness tools, taking care of themselves, and when we as adults model those healthy strategies instead of the same unhealthy tools society throws us, the young people look up to us. Even if they don't know what we say, they do what we do. And so thank you for being.
I agree, because mainly, and it's crazy now, the kids and people I go talk to today, they can care less about me being an ex-NBA player playing for the Knicks. It's more so your story and what you're doing, taking care of my mental and being there for me. So I'm more known for that than the basketball player. So I agree. So I agree 100%.
Thank you. And Rajshri, so you have shared so much wisdom with us this evening, but what are your parting words of guidance for those listening tonight as we move forward?
Before I answer your question, Michael, I think it's great to be known for your humanity, separate from the basketball and your career and all of that. Imagine, the conversation is around Michael and his humanity and him showing up. So that pivots me to your question, Dr. Sharma, which is that I think people started to access and realize that they really need to, what we're saying over and over, connect to themselves, And one of the things that happened as mental health, the conversation of mental health came up to the forefront, what is underlying it is also starting to come up more and more. The inequities, whether that's an issue around race, gender, any of these social injustices has also arisen because those injustices contribute to our mental state of well-being or not well-being. And so I think these issues have also come up to the forefront, and I think that's a very positive thing. But I agree with Michael overwhelmingly. The biggest conversation is the recognition that it all starts inside of me. You know, my mind, my mental well-being is either my friend or my enemy. What am I walking around with? What kind of voice is talking to me? And am I ever pausing to look at myself inside? And so that's an amazing thing, which then means greater sense of family, greater sense of, you know, pausing to maybe pray before dinner or pausing to connect to a friend. It's just brought out greater humanity, and that I think is a huge plus for individuals, families, society, and all the change that we're preferably driving towards.
Well, thank you to each of you. This has been such a fun, enlightening discussion. There have been so many points of wisdom, aha moments, resources that each of you have shared. And I just am so grateful to have had the opportunity to participate in this conversation. So thank you to each of you. I'm going to turn things over to Jason, who's going to wrap up this session. But thank you again to each of our esteemed panelists this evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you for a great panel, and thank you all who joined. If you want more mental health information and more details about the 50C3 campaign, it was mentioned a couple times in here, but please do visit fitdc3.com. I want to thank Aetna. I want to thank all of our panelists, and of course, I want to thank all of you who attended. These 50C forums are going to happen on a semi-monthly basis. Whenever we've got a chance to get panelists involved and got a good topic, we're going to bring it to you guys and present it completely free. We're also going to record this session, and it's going to live on 50c3.com going forward. So again, this was a great evening. Thank you all for joining us, and we will see you next time on the 50C3 forum.
Welcome to the Breathe With Me movement. Our mission is to nurture and sustain a community of care, compassion, and justice. We offer tools to heal from stress, trauma, and the violence of systemic oppression, racism, and injustice. My name is Joanne. Breathe with me.
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 Breathe with us.
Breathe with me.
Breathe with me.
Breathe with me.
Breathe with me.